Welcome to Warblog. This is a second video detailing the site in general as an overview on what the game is all about and what you can do. The previous video that I have on the sign up page detailed some of the mechanics. In this one, I really just want to look at the site in general, not the mechanics of the game. Essentially, just looking at it from the front end and going through some of the games and just sort of looking at them. Now, starting from the home page, one of the things that I'm trying to achieve here to some extent is not just the idea of playing a game, but providing essentially a war blog. I wouldn't say I'm fantastically into war. I've played strategy games most of my life in some form or another. In the 80s I used to play the GDW Third World War series, which I think, to be quite honest, is probably my favourite game. And I never really played it properly. Just the scale of it and the the contemporary nature, really, just quite satisfying and intriguing. But anyway, so it's not so much that I think, oh well, I don't really know much about war. When I was looking at the TOS-1, which is a Russian tank rocket system. Just because I saw it, I was doing a bit of research for this, and I thought, wow, that's interesting. But things like that I just don't know anything about. And now I can look them up and learn them, but I haven't got a clue really. You start talking to me about current Soviet hardware, I'd be lost. Anyway, that's irrelevant. So what I'm trying to do here, essentially. A couple of years ago, I actually thought, oh, what I'd really like is just one of these sites you can go and you can find modern scenarios. You can go to sites and, well, to start off with, most of it isn't really hex based, and there was just nothing on modern scenarios. So I actually got the domain Warblog to document essentially all the sort of the current war hotspots, but not just so much that. The whole idea really was you could go and look at a country and then look at the history of that country's war chronologically or in some way, but it didn't really work out. I didn't really get much past the initial development stage. I tried to create an SVG map, which has ended up something a little bit like a risk map. I thought, oh, this is good. You get to click into each country, and then I populate each country's military hardware, and you can just jump in and start playing a game like that. But it didn't really work because you had huge countries like Russia, which were one big blobby hex thing, and you never be able to take it out. So you need such a small, refined SVG and database, such a huge database, it just became a bit impractical. And then I had the little hex things. I looked up this thing, how to create hexes, just a basic sort of bunch of maths. I had that in my favourites for about 6 months, and I kept putting it off, and I just finally put a few things together. And to be quite honest, I'm amazed that it's come out like this. It wasn't my initial intention, and I'm getting pretty excited, to be quite honest. So essentially, it's designed really to sort of fulfil those sort of objectives. So you can go down and sort of think, oh, okay, well, what's been happening in Europe, and you click the Europe thing. And you can get sort of, some details on battles. You think, oh, that's 1992, that's rubbish. Oh, look at this, 2008. So the whole idea is that you can go through and look at things from, in regions from a historical perspective. I mean, as time goes by, I might refine how you can navigate this, maybe put a search box in or something. I'm really trying to sort of create little small things that you can then sort of jump into and get a good idea of how things work. I mean, for example, just looking at this one, the Battle of Khorram Shahir, Iran. Well, this is part of the Iran-Iraq War, which I've got a book on. simply because it sort of interests me. And so we click on this one just to give sort of a walkthrough on some of the features. So essentially, it's designed to just give you a sort of a strategic map overview, and it's actually quite hard to get this. I mean, if you look this battle up, the Battle of Khorram Shahir, whatever it is, there's pretty much no such thing as a strategic map. Now, I might be wrong, but generally speaking, going through, they'll have strategic maps that consist of sort of very vague arrows and maybe a few front lines like the weather report, but really nothing sort of that is detailed like this. So the whole idea is you can sit there and say, okay, I can see that because that's how I think. I understand these sorts of maps. If you don't understand these maps, then clearly it's not your cup of tea. But no, if you do, I mean, this is actually pretty informative, and that's what it's designed for. So it's designed so you can actually have a look at that, and then, and from my point of view, I can come back and refine this if I decide that I've put too many of these, Bashir units in, or too many Pasadan units, or not enough of this, or it's not weighted this. Well, I can edit this, but this, to some extent, is historically accurate. I usually define that, qualify that in my write-up, because sometimes I just make the units up, because I don't know what was there, just a lot of troops. There's no sort of like definitive, notation of what was here. Iran is still a closed nation. Iraq was closed. A lot of the leaders are dead. A lot of their archives were destroyed in the war. No one actually really knows exactly what happened. But this was a battle that took place at the beginning of the Iran-Iraq war when Iraq invaded Iran. They're just going through the process of just from my point of view of researching it. You start to learn a lot, and I think a lot of people, they say, oh, you can learn quite a lot from strategy games, and that's sort of what I'm after. So you don't even have to play it to sort of look at this and sort of appreciate that, and then sort of get an idea of where Khorram Shahir is, and then maybe look it up on Google Maps. Generally, I've got a Wikipedia link there. Occasionally, the maps are a little misleading. Let me see if I can find one that might be misleading. Let's look at this one. Yeah, I mean, for example, this one. I've gone for an oversized map on this, but there's a hell of a lot more units. For example, quite a few of those dark green ones, and they're not on the map. They don't start on the map, so you can quite often have a map that is, for example, this one here. This is an interesting one. Essentially, this country here decided to invade this one and put in a puppet government. I can't remember what they're called. And there's only 2 units there. You sort of think, oh wow, look at that. I mean, I've got 5 artillery, 16 infantry, 10 infantry there, 5 artillery. Look at all these tanks, special forces. Oh, I totally steamroller this little place. Job done. The thing is, when you read about it and you get the links, and then you start to look through at the full belligerent list. Now, obviously, Georgia gets quite some reinforcements. The Russians come to the aid of this little country, and as you can see, that the Russian force is quite substantial. So you've got to look at the map in context with reinforcements. I mean, these people come in and turn 16, but when the Russians arrive, they completely outnumber these people. Now, the thing is, in a lot of these battles, as far as I'm concerned, there is no sort of, you can't necessarily win them. A lot of them, they're going to be lost, and that's another thing that I think my side is sort of attempting to achieve. That the whole sort of just maybe getting away a little bit from the fact that most war games are balanced and you have 2 people and one of them's going to win. It's a game of player versus player, and they're balanced. And these are not balanced, and this is not a balanced game. The Georgia nation is going to lose. I mean, I haven't actually played it yet, but the thing is, the numbers are there. But just going through some of the others, I mean, the Burundi 2015 coup, they gave up. Now, when you actually start looking at the maps, they could have held on, but when you look at what they bring on, now there's not a huge amount, but they have some artillery and they do have some armor. Currently, the armor can't do indirect fire, but when I get, that's one thing that's sort of next in the things to do. But essentially, what are they going to do? Retreat into the city, entrench, fair enough, they'll be worth quite a lot, and then just sit there and get bombarded. No, they surrendered, and that's what they did. But it's not even just that one. There's there's another one. Burkina Faso. I mean, this was quite interesting. Again, a coup in Burkina Faso. Again, maybe quite a sizable force, but they surrendered. This game can't be won. But it's a map that gives you perhaps a strategic overview of what was happening in a way that you can't necessarily get elsewhere, and hopefully will appeal to people with a strategic mindset that sort of think, oh God, this looks really good. So they're not designed necessarily for you to have a balanced game, and so you can play this on your own because there's nothing that this unit can do. There is only one rebel unit, the Regiment of Presidential Security, versus everyone else. The idea was the country would rise up with them and other units would rise up with them, but they didn't. And the guy went to prison, I think. So now the thing is, I'm just really trying to give a sort of general overview of, there's another Iran-Iraq war item there. Some of them are pretty poor. I mean, this is probably the most embarrassing one of all, because I really didn't know what was what. And to be quite honest, I really don't even know whether this map is in centre. Probably, if there's anything I'd have to do again, it would be this one. I mean, I don't think the troops were where they were. I think a lot of Vietnamese were actually held up in these mountains. This was where the stronghold was, and the Americans were probably coming more from the south and the north than from the east. But I mean, things like the Israeli-Gaza 2014 conflict, I mean, this is not finished yet, to be quite honest. I'd sort of do this, create a campaign, and then not really go back to it. And I haven't gone back to this. This needs a lot more work, but it's quite, I wouldn't say difficult, but there's quite a lot of effort to go into figuring out what was in here, especially when it comes down to Israeli air power and naval operations. So, I am sort of trying to pick out things that are actually, contemporary or, I mean, this is a really important sort of area, and what Israel was doing there was quite controversial. And again, it gives you that sort of insight into that, that's outside of, the regular news channels. And I'm trying to sort of choose completely random, unassociated campaigns. So although a lot of them are going to be, because I'm trying to do things that are in the media now, what's in the media is the Middle East, obviously. So, but I'm trying to pick up on a bit of everything. I mean, I think for example, the Brunei revolt, that's sort of 1962. I mean, this one I think is probably the Falkland Islands. I mean, this has to be a classic. Now, whether I got it right or not is something I can fine tune. I think getting this far with this game was sort of astonishing, really. I would like the map had been a larger map, and I have contemplated doing larger maps. But something like the Falkland Islands is a classic, as well as let me see if I can find it quickly. The Cuba game. I mean, this is an absolute classic in sort of military campaigns. It sort of works okay, but so I'm trying to pick up on a bit of everything. So I mean, you can look at this. A lot of people haven't really even seen a map of the the Bay of Pigs and the geography of it. The swamp, whatever this green stuff is. Red beach, blue beach. A map obviously gives you sort of an insight that a wiki article can't give you, and I've got some references down here, the Wikipedia link. They're not really. I'm not saying it hasn't been done and dusted, but you'd be surprised. This sort of detail of map work.